3 weeks ago, my wife went to visit our son and his wife in Kelowna. She called me when she arrived, said the apartment was lovely, that our daughter-in-law had made her favorite soup. That was the last normal conversation we had. I decided to surprise them. 63 years old, retired from 30 years driving long haul for a forestry supply company out of Prince George, and I still get that restless feeling when I'm home alone too long. I packed an overnight bag, filled the truck, and drove the 4 hours south without telling anyone. I pulled onto their street just after 2 in the afternoon. The sun was low already, late October in the Okanagan, the hills all copper and rust. I was maybe 20 feet from their front door when the woman from next door came off her porch fast, waving both arms like she was flagging down a transport. Wait, please. You're Rémi's father, aren't you? I've seen photos. Please don't go in there yet. I need to tell you something. I remember thinking she'd locked herself out. Something small like that. I had no idea that the next 10 minutes would change everything I thought I knew about my own family. Her name was Colette. She was in her late 50s, a retired school administrator who'd moved to Kelowna from Quebec City a decade ago. She pulled me to the far side of her car, so we were out of view from my son's windows, and she spoke quickly, quietly, with the deliberate calm of someone who had been rehearsing what she needed to say. Your wife is not well. She hasn't been well for days, and I don't think it's illness. I stood there not understanding. She told me she'd heard things through the shared wall. Arguments, my son's voice and his wife's, low and urgent late at night. She'd heard my wife crying. Then, 3 days ago, she'd seen my daughter-in-law at the pharmacy. She knew the pharmacist there, an old friend, and she'd noticed what was being picked up. A sedative, a strong one, prescribed to someone else entirely. I felt the ground shift under me the way it does when a trailer jackknifes. That half second where your body understands danger before your mind does. I wrote down the name, Colette said. She pressed a folded piece of paper into my hand. I'm not certain. I don't want to be wrong about this, but I couldn't stay quiet. I called my wife's cell phone standing right there on the sidewalk. It rang 8 times and went to voicemail. I called again, same thing. I knocked on the door hard. My son opened it. Rémi, 34 years old, my only child, the one I'd driven 4 hours to surprise. He looked at me with something I can only describe as calculation, a fraction of a second where his face did math before it arranged itself into a smile. Dad, what are you doing here? I told him I'd come to visit. He stepped back to let me in, and I walked through to the living room, and my wife was on the couch under a blanket in the middle of the afternoon, barely awake, her eyes glassy and slow. She turned her head when she heard my voice and she tried to say my name, but it came out wrong. Thick, like the word had weight she couldn't lift. I have driven through mountain passes in January whiteout. I have worked beside men who died in equipment accidents. I thought I knew what fear felt like. I did not know what fear felt like until I saw my wife's eyes that afternoon and understood she didn't know where she was. I told my son I was taking her to the hospital. His wife, Nadine, they'd been married 4 years. I had danced at their wedding. I had helped them with the down payment on that apartment, came out of the kitchen and said my wife was just tired, that she had a cold, that she'd been sleeping a lot, but that was normal. She was fighting something off. I looked at Nadine and I said, very quietly, that I was taking my wife to the hospital, and that if either of them tried to stop me, I would call the RCMP before I reached the door. Neither of them moved. I got my wife to Kelowna General in 11 minutes. The emergency nurse took one look at her and called for a doctor immediately. They admitted her within the hour. The attending physician, a careful and precise man who explained everything twice so I would understand, told me that her blood showed elevated levels of a benzodiazepine, a sedative, at a concentration far beyond what any physician would prescribe. He asked me directly whether she had a prescription for this medication. She did not. He asked me whether I wanted him to contact the police. I said yes. What came out over the following days was this. My son had gambling debts, not small ones. He owed a significant amount to people who were not banks, and he had borrowed additionally from a line of credit taken out jointly, without my wife's full knowledge, using her signature on documents she had not read carefully. The total was somewhere above $90,000. My wife, once she recovered enough to speak clearly, told me she had arrived for the visit and within the first day had started asking questions about their finances. She'd noticed stress in Raimi. She'd seen letters. She'd started to understand the shape of something she wasn't supposed to understand. They had decided to slow her down. That was how I came to think of it. Slow her down while they figured out what to do. The medication made her confused, compliant, easy to manage. It bought them time. What they hadn't accounted for was the neighbor. Colette had lived beside them for 2 years. She'd brought them a welcome basket when they moved in. She'd watched my wife arrive 3 weeks earlier, with a suitcase and a smile. And she'd watched what happened after. She was a woman who had spent 30 years around children, and she recognized when someone was being harmed by people who were supposed to protect them. She couldn't prove anything. She just couldn't stay quiet. My wife spent 5 days in hospital. The first 2 she slept. The 3rd day she was angry. The 4th day she cried, and I sat in the chair beside her bed and held her hand and didn't say much because there wasn't much to say that would help. The 5th day she asked me why. I didn't have an answer for her. I still don't, not really. I've thought about it more times than I can count since then. Lying awake in the house we've owned for 31 years. The house where Remy grew up. The house where I built the deck and replaced the furnace and put new shingles on the roof one summer, with my own hands. I think about a boy learning to skate at the outdoor rink behind the community center, and a young man at his university graduation, and the day he told us about Nadine, how proud he looked. I try to find the moment where it turned. I can't find it. Maybe that's not how it works. The RCMP investigated for several weeks. They pulled phone records, bank records, pharmacy records. They spoke with the pharmacist, with the physician who had originally prescribed the medication to someone else, a former colleague of Nadine's who reported having a prescription bottle go missing. They spoke with people my son owed money to, which opened additional investigations I was not privy to. In January, my son and his wife were each charged with administering a noxious substance. Remy faced an additional charge related to financial fraud in connection with my wife's signature on the line of credit. Both were also charged with failing to provide the necessaries of life. I was in Prince George when I got the call. I sat in the kitchen for a long time afterward. My wife was upstairs. She'd been back home for 2 months by then, moving carefully through her days, relearning her normal. She came downstairs and looked at my face and knew. "They've been charged," I said. She sat down across from me. She didn't cry. She looked out the window at the backyard, at the bird feeder I'd put up in November, because she'd said she wanted to watch birds this winter. She was quiet for a long time. "Good," she said finally. Just that one word. "There are people, family members, an uncle, my son's old friends who reached out, who think I should have handled it differently. Kept it inside the family. Tried to get Raimi help rather than involving the police. I've heard it phrased in different ways, but it always means the same thing. They think I should have protected him. I protected my wife for 38 years. I chose her when she was 24, and I was 25, and I have never once regretted it. When I walked into that apartment and saw what had been done to her, there was no version of events where I stayed quiet. There is no amount of loyalty to a child that outweighs what was done to her. I don't say that with anger. I say it as plainly as I would tell you what the weather is. My son has a lawyer. The process moves slowly. His counsel has indicated he intends to contest several aspects of the charges. I don't follow it day by day. I let our own lawyer handle the parts that need handling. What I do instead is this. I make my wife breakfast. I put suet in the bird feeder, because the chickadees and nuthatches have figured out we're reliable, and they come every morning now, a small, reliable crowd of them. I drove her to her follow-up appointments, and I sat in waiting rooms, and I read old magazines, and I was there when she came out. In February, she started a watercolor class at the community center, something she'd wanted to do for years. I drive her there on Tuesday evenings, and I pick her up after, and sometimes we stop at Tim Hortons on the way home, and she gets a steep tea, and I get a coffee, and we sit, and we talk about nothing in particular. Her recovery has been good, the doctors say. The medication left no permanent neurological damage that they can identify. She has some anxiety now that she didn't have before, some days that are harder than others. But she is here. She is herself. She knows what day it is and where she is, and she laughs at the same things that have always made her laugh. That matters more to me than I can put into words. The trial date has not been set. When it comes, I will be there. I will tell what I know, plainly and completely, to whoever needs to hear it. My son made choices. Nadine made choices. Those choices have consequences that belong to them, not to me. Before I left Kelowna that day, the day I took my wife to the hospital, I knocked on Colette's door. She came out and I thanked her. I didn't know how else to say what I wanted to say. That she had done something that took courage. That she had no obligation to get involved in something that wasn't her business, and that she had done it anyway, because she is the kind of person who cannot watch someone be harmed and pretend she doesn't see it. She waved it off, the way people do when they're uncomfortable with gratitude. She said she just did what anyone would do. I don't think that's true. I think most people would have told themselves it wasn't their place. I think most people would have looked away. She didn't. I've kept in touch with her. She sends the occasional email. Last month she told me the apartment next door had new tenants, a young couple with a baby. She said the baby cries sometimes at 2 in the morning, and she'd forgotten how loud that could be, and she didn't mind at all. I told my wife. She smiled at that. It was the kind of smile that reaches the eyes. I am 63 years old, and I have learned things this year that I would have preferred not to know. I have learned that love can calculate. I have learned that the people you trust most exist in a version of themselves that is separate from the version you thought you knew. I have learned that you can build a life carefully, piece by piece over decades, and have someone walk through it like it means nothing. But I have also learned that a stranger can decide your life is worth protecting, that a woman who owed me nothing chose to cross a sidewalk and flag me down and say, "Wait, wait. I need to tell you something." I think about that too, when the nights are long. My wife is in the living room right now. I can hear the television. She's watching something she likes and laughing at something I didn't hear. The chickadees come back every morning. The coffee is on. Whatever comes next, we will face it together. We have always faced things together. That, at least, has not changed.